You know, they've taken the siding off, you know, the asbestos siding, and the wrought iron went around the porch.
Uh-huh.
So they took that off for it.
Milligan owns this now?
Yeah, they bought it from the son. And see, the wrought iron went, be careful.
There it is here.
Yeah, it went
They
all
just
around.
plowed it off.
It went all around this way. And then you went down, you know, the terrace, all the way down that way. And it had a circular drive.
Wow.
And then back here was his photography studio, his chemical lab, and, you know, different things. It was like a carriage house in the back.
That was white buildings?
Yes. Uh-huh. And, but see, the grounds went all the way.
There's a deer. There's two.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're here frequently. See, you see them, Rob?
Yeah, I thought they were fake.
That
But lots of wildlife. There used to be a little cabin back there. We used to walk back there, you know, when I was a child. And it's a sloping hillside. You know, but gorgeous, gorgeous grounds.
So it goes up behind here.
It's not flat. It's just kind of sloping, almost terrace-like.
Now, how old is this house?
This house was probably built at about 1908. It was built before the blast. They bought it. See, he came from Germany to be with Bonnet. He came and then went to Harvard and got his finished his law degree, and then from New York, national headquarters, came here because of Bimberg and North American, and they did parachute cords.
Parachute cords.
For the war effort.
That's what it was.
And that's why it was high. You
high security.
Exactly.
Right.
You couldn't go in the plant. It was considered as great a risk as Oak Ridge. So nobody could know what was going on in there. But anyway, the Bleys bought it in the 30s and lived here. He died in the driveway out there. He went to get the papers. She'd gone to the dentist, and she came back, and you see the driveway has a little dip, and she came back and found him with his nitroglycerin tablets in his hand, and the poodle was beside him.
Now, who, Mr. Bley or Dr. Bley, what was his?
Mr. Bley. He didn't have a PhD.
And who was he?
He was the patent attorney for North American and Bimberg Rayon corporations.
So when he got patents for the Bimberg Corporation, they were in his name.
Well, the attorney holds the patents. Right. That's customary.
That's good. That's a piece of information that's valuable if I'm going to research patents.
Well, the interesting thing about it always, you know, the patent attorney who is hired by a corporation, they hold them. It's a matter of speak. They hold the patents.
Okay.
And but he traveled all over the world. I mean, I can remember being over here as a child, and he would be coming into Tri-Cities Airport from Paris or wherever, and it was most interesting.
That was a large corporation.
It was large, and they were headquartered in New York City. And you know, they just.
Why did they choose to live here? Because of this plant.
Because
he came
as the attorney for these two plants, which these two plants provided a livelihood for people in the area. I mean, they didn't know at that time, of course, the working conditions were not the best in the world, but they didn't know about chemicals and what it did to people. Yeah. But it put food on the table for people who otherwise wouldn't have had a job.
What is the second plant? The first one's down in Elizabeth downtown, right?
Well, they're both downtown, North American and Bimberg. And they were side by side. But Bimberg was the more premier research
and
plant.
North American was a production plant.
Yes, they were production, and then once the war effort was over, they produced rayon, which became a sought-after fabric for women's fashions.
Right.
And they did the fabric, and then the fabric went to New York and to the fashion industry, which was major at that time. But as I've said, the Bleys were very down-to-earth people. she was working at the Franklin Club, which was the club in Elizabethton for employees.
Ah.
The higher up employees, and they would go there for lunch. And she was a student here at Milligan and working as a waitress. And he was older than she by 15 years, but their eyes met. And she spilled ice.
You said ice water and soup in his lap.
Soup. She finished him off with soup, and he said he had no choice but to ask her out. And when he proposed to her and gave her an engagement ring, he flew her in the plant, had the plant plane fly over Ripshin, and he gave her the ring.
Over the
Ripshin area, that's it, Carter County, yeah. It's a resort. It kind of, at that time was a kind of resort or fishing and hunting place. And but he was very down to earth. I can remember as a child, he would be sitting, I'll show you in a minute, in the living room with his pipe in his hand, and everything ordinary was going on. The dogs were running in and out of the house. Mrs. Bly lived by the seat of her pants. There was nothing pretentious about her. Even though she was an elegant lady, she was very relaxed, very laid back. And I remember we went to a wedding at St. Mary's Catholic Church, and she didn't have a hat. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I don't have a hat." And so we ran into Massengill's. And again, not arrogant, she just said, "Ambrose, I need a hat. We're on our way to a wedding." And she wore hats in an elegant way, and he put this beautiful hat on her. And out the door we went, and as we were sitting at St. Mary's in the wedding, my mother got out her manicure scissors and cut the tag off with the contents of the hat in it. But she was a lover of animals. She took in every stray animal. I think the best way I can describe her is she loved people unconditionally.
I was going to just ask what the draw was. Did they have children that you played with, or was these just...
Well, their son, the physician, was older, and their daughter was older, but they would keep me on occasion. But whoever built this home, built it, they had means, and the home right across here was the Taylor home. And Governor...
That's white one right
Yes,
there?
and that's the Governor Taylor home.
Oh, Governor Taylor.
And both boys, were gubernatorial candidates, Alf and Bob Taylor.
Both the Taylor boys were.
Yes, and they debated against it. There's, you can look that history up. But my mother was born in that house.
Your mother was born?
My mother,
how did that happen?
Okay. My mother was born in 1908.
Okay.
I came along. I was the afterthought.
Around this way.
I was the afterthought. And,
okay.
But what happened, my mother's family were in the Blue Springs community of Elizabethton, and they had dairies and businesses, and my father's issues, was another thing altogether, but she was born there. All right, what happened, his past was completely different, but anyway, what happened? Her parents were going to move into the historic house in Blue Springs, which was built by the Carragers, who were early settlers.
Okay.
So they decided, since my grandmother was pregnant with my mother, they needed to be closer to Johnson City. The physicians were better there.
I see.
And so they leased this house.
They leased the Taylor house.
And I have a letter where my grandmother wrote and said, "The house is adequate, but we are eager to get into, the home they were going to." And she said, that she was most eager to be there. And she said, "The baby is doing fine, and we will leave when she's 6 months old."
But that was you or your mother?
My mother.
Your mother.
She was born right upstairs. If you look straight ahead, she was born upstairs in that house.
Cool.
And that was known at that time as the Hayes Farm. All that property extended, over where you see the field houses and all.
All Milligan property.
It is now Milligan. The Taylor family sold it to Milligan.
Now, your father worked for Bamberg too for a while, didn't he?
Exactly.
Was that the connection with Mr. Bly?
In the lab.
In the lab?
Yes. He could not talk about what he did, but he was involved in the research of the strength of the threads. And when Mr. Bly would travel, he would travel with him and he would interpret the papers.
Oh.
If Mr. Bly needed. Mr. Bly.
Okay, Mr. Bly had the legal and your dad had the chemical. I got it.
And he would travel with him. And that's how we became connected. Right. And, you know, it was, Bimberg and North American were like a closed society in ways. It provided food for people in the community, but they were sworn they could not talk about what they did during the wartime in the plant. And they had buses that ran up into Butler and places like this so that people could get to work because they didn't have transportation.
And people came over the mountain on the Tweetsie.
Yes. And
they arranged it so that the women, who could work cheaper, I'm sure, but the women would come over the mountain on the Tweetsie in the morning and be home in time to make
fix
their
the meal.
husbands dinner.
Exactly. And in later years, they ran buses, which looked like school buses, you know. And they would, you know, take the people home and then bring the people back for the next shift. They ran 3 to 11. They ran day shift and night shift. The plant was never down, which would be very expensive for it to be down. They were sworn during the war, you cannot talk about this, you know. And they knew. I mean, they knew they were doing their best for the war effort. And, you know, I can remember when I was really little, threads. I loved to touch the threads, you know, the samples of the threads. And they had the patents, a lot of the patents were held because it had to do with the dye.
Oh.
You know, how do you know, how can you dye the fabrics and the threads together so it won't bleed? What is the best thread to use in rayon? Amazing. But I can remember touching those samples. And Linda, you know, she would play with the samples, you know. I have a German test tube holder. And I also have the German-English chemist dictionary that was used in the lab. And I have 2 or 3 books like that and a tables book, you know, for the calculations. Fascinating.
Can you tell us what that is? Because this is recording, I'll take the audio. Tell us what this is.
This is a technical and scientific German manual that was used in the lab at American Bimberg Corporation. And this was very handy because lots of the information prior to World War II was in German, and those people in the lab needed to refer to this manual when they weren't sure about what a specific term meant. And this, as in any engineering situation, you wanted it to be precise and correct, so this book itself made everything very specific and to the point.
Thanks very much. Now,
this 6 place tables book was also in the lab at American Bimberg Corporation, and this was a handy reference for such thing as common logarithms, trigonometry, radians, etc. And when formulas were used in chemical analysis, table of square roots was required to interpret or to give form to such, and that was the purpose of this text.
fabulous. Thank you.
This is a German-English dictionary for chemists, and again, this was required to definitely define certain terms that were used within the chemical lab. And again, in order to be concise and precise, such was needed when you weren't sure about your German. You simply referred to this manual.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, pull that further in there.
This is a wooden stand that was used to hold test tubes. The stand itself is from Germany, and it was used in the lab when various formulas were used to determine the strength of threads. And this is probably something that was made at the turn of the century.
Like teenager, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, initially, this room was open.
Like a porch?
Right, this would have been a front porch when it was first built. And the Bleys enclosed the porch because it was a play area for their son first. And, you know, they added the windows. And then lots of storage, you know, you can see this. And you see the original porch if you look right here. Look here, see, this is the original, where the porch was.
The
See how the porch looks?
outside of
Yes.
the siding, that's
That's
original board
yeah,
siding.
that's original siding. And they enclosed it. And this became like a sunroom. And they've already taken this door off. I think Ken probably wanted to keep this door. And this, you can hear, I stole the register last night. And there were 2 stained glass windows, one on either side, and they were from Germany. And I'm in the process of hoping to negotiate with the maintenance man who wanted them to keep them in the community.
Oh, that'd be good.
But now this was the living room. Lots of wonderful times in here. And this is not original. The original chandelier was taken earlier. And this was the dining room. And, you know, the lady who worked here in her earlier years, you know, this was her path from the kitchen to there was a large table. And of course the kitchen. And it was more a pantry-style kitchen than anything because things were like that at that time. And then, of course, you had the bathroom off the kitchen, and that's original to the Bleys, you know, of course the clothes on the sink. Yes. And then this was, at one time, a screened-in porch, and they enclosed it. And then...
Interesting though, what this looks like it was originally house.
Sure.
And then this was screened porch.
Screened porch. And then this was just, this initially would have been the maid's quarters. In this room. And that would have been in the
with her
30s.
own outside door.
Exactly,
Right.
of course. And then, this is the downstairs.
Okay.
And this was spacious for that time, and of course this went down. This was your way to get down to the garage downstairs. You just went down.
And that probably was a design feature to have a drive-in garage.
Of course, the drive-in garage.
When the house was built.
Exactly,
It would have been a design
right.
feature.
And in many houses like this, especially older houses, you know, you wanted to not have to go out in the elements, so you, you know, you just went from the house down. Also, your driver would go down and then bring your car around.
Which would have made this a very modern house when it was built.
Exactly, and as I said, the means, whoever built the house initially, had means and thought it through.
Well, and initially with the building, the means meant that you could have a driver, you could have a maid.
Exactly.
Was the blockhouse back there later?
No,
then?
original.
That was like the carriage.
That would have been the carriage house, as I told you before. That was the carriage house, and there were probably quarters out there for the driver.
That's what
because there's in one area there is a bathroom.
I don't know about plumbing history.
Well, there was okay. My mother's home in Blue Springs, the historic home, the Carrier House. Her father had an engine. He was a businessman, had an engineer's mind. And their home had the first water closet. Right, well, what he did, no one had a bathroom in that area. And he worked with gravity and a well and they built a reservoir, which put water in and put a bathroom in. So, you can imagine.
So what,
if my mother were
period?
my mother was
1900s?
That would have been probably, my mother was born in 1908. I would say they had that reservoir and water in the house by the 20s. And because she would have been, July the 18th, she would have been 102.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, I came later.
You sure did.
But anyway, interesting when we talk about the presents, which, again, always
Well,
Linda.
let's mention that presence, because
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
The history of the house. Okay. Mrs. Bly first spoke of this presence, you know, and when she was a young mother in this house, and she, I think, was pregnant at that time with Roger,
Okay.
the son who's a physician. And I'll show you upstairs. She, Mr. Bly, traveled, of course, a lot for the plant, and she was upstairs asleep, and she spoke of waking up. And I think it's symbolic that she was pregnant, and I'll get to that. She was, like I said, asleep, and she just woke up, and she said, there at the foot of the bed was the profile, whatever we want to say, of a young woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I was unafraid. She smiled at me and stayed there, you know, momentarily, and it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she also spoke of sitting here at the foot of the stairs, right here, and sensing something passing by, but no form.
Mm-hmm.
But again, not afraid. Okay, Linda, the daughter, came down to breakfast one morning, and she said,
When she was
6 or 7.
6 or 7, okay.
And she said, Mom, you know, this lady came in my bedroom last night, same bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And she sat at the foot of my bed, and she was like she was lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't afraid of her, and she smiled at me. And then she was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And in her childlike way, she went on about what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
When Mrs. Bly went to Greenwood, Roger asked me if I knew anyone who could be a caretaker for the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I came up with someone. I had known her through the school setting, and she had worked, she cleaned for my cousin and his wife. And she of course was here, and she came over to see me, and she was really funny, unique. And she said, she was leaning against the rail, and she said, Bessie, I don't know anybody else. You take care of odd things. And she said, that was her way of saying what she said, I know I'm sane. I'm not the most educated person in the world, but I think I'm relatively sane. I said, well, of course you are. She said, Michelle said, her grandchildren were here a lot. Mm-hmm. The daughter had, you know, she took care of them part. You know how that goes. She said, Michelle said, Nana, I have to tell you something. And she said, sure. Nana, same bedroom. Nana, last night, this lady was sitting at the foot of my bed, and she was, you know, maybe like an angel. And she said, she smiled at me, but I wasn't afraid of her. And then she was gone. And she said, okay. I said, would it make you feel any better if and then I told her. And she said, okay. Well, and then, as I told you yesterday, or day before yesterday.
Yeah, that's the real corker.
I came over here to get some rocks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I have this thing about, you know, what is it, the field of energy and rocks. I have rocks. And my mother was the same way, you know, rocks from places. And I came over and the tape was out. They were taking the asbestos off, but they'd finished and I came up to the tape, and this young man, about 30, said, ma'am, I can't let you in. He said, we're doing asbestos removal. And I said, well, I'm not really afraid of that. I said, I'm sort of connected to the house in a roundabout way. And he said, you are? And I said, yes. He said, you been in this house? I said, oh, many times. You slept in this house? Many times. He said, could we talk? I said, sure. He lifted the tape up. He said, I hope nobody comes by, my supervisors. And he said, I'm an educated person. I have a college degree. I have a wife and 2 children. I live in Bristol, but strange. And I feel I can trust you, your judgment here. He said, have you ever felt anything in this house? I said, and I proceeded to tell him about that. And he said, oh, I think I feel better. And I said, where were you upstairs? And he told me, same room. And I said, he didn't see any outline of anything. He just said, I felt it. And he said, you know how hot it has been today. He said, when I got upstairs, I didn't feel the heat anymore. It was like the heat dissipated. And he said it made my hair stand on end. And then he said, would you go in the house with me? And I said, sure. And so, you know, he said, we agreed that when we felt the presence that we would say that, and we got to the top of the stairs and we both said yes. And we went in the room, and it was a sensation. But I have never seen, you know, a form. But it appeared.
You haven't seen the outline.
No, the outline or whatever.
Felt
I felt it. Now, you know, I'm very interested in the morphic field concept and energy in the universe. We know it's there. But he said, why do you think you never felt? Or why do you think you never saw it? And I said, well, probably because I didn't. I think everyone that has experienced it lived in the house. I didn't live at the house. And I said, she's seen this essence of femininity, children, and the fact that Mrs. Bly was pregnant with a child. So, but he said, what did you ever feel? I said, oh no, nothing but happiness in the house, and lots of love and happiness, and you know, freedom for a child to be a child. So anyway, that just sort of made my hair stand on end when he said, would you come talk to me? And he lifts up the tape. And I knew what he was going to tell me. I had no doubt in my mind. But now, they had lovely furnishings in the house, you know, some antiques and some, like in this corner was, it was like a china cabinet, and it would light from the inside, and there were the German figurines and things, you know. You know, that was located here, and then of course the couch, you know, and Mr. Bly's chair sat right here, you know. That was his throne, so to speak.
Right, just so he was
right here.
Right here in the traffic pattern.
He was right here, and here, you know, right there sat there was a stand with his pipes and his pipe tobacco and that type of thing. Now, he wasn't high lord and manner. He didn't have that. He was very, very, very loving person, and there was, again, no arrogance.
When did he come over?
He came over in the late 20s, early 30s.
Before the Second World War.
Of course, and that, right. And that was, they were already, I'm not sure what they were producing, but there is an area in Elizabeth known as Germantown, and there are the stucco houses. You know, they were built for plant employees, and before the Blys moved here, it was for plant officials. Before they moved here, they lived for a short time in Germantown.
Yeah, that's an interesting point as far as World War I and World War II, and you have a German plant here in, was there any social irony in that, or?
The interesting thing, because it provided food on people's tables and provided a job, you did not have, you're not going to knock someone who's providing you with food and nourishment for your family.
And early 30s is
and they were
depression.
And they were very, very good to their employees.
Took care of their employees.
They took care of them in the best. Again, lots of people had issues with pulmonary problems, but they didn't know at that time. And the chemicals, you know, would drip down, you know, through the processing part of it. But I remember as a child going to they would have German Christmas celebrations, and they would have a chamber music group in the home, and the Christmas tree would have live candles, this kind of thing. They were very kind to children, and I remember the Gustavs. They finally built a motel in Abingdon, and they had no children, and they were crazy about children. I remember being in their home, and but I remember at the Bleys, there would be, in that corner, right there, they would pull the couch back, and there would be the Christmas tree, and they never put it up until Christmas Eve.
Right.
And they would put the live candles on it. When later years they didn't, but earlier. And, and there was a grand piano in the dining room, and Linda played.
There was a grand as well as the dining room table.
Yes.
In the dining room.
It was the smaller baby grand. Baby grand. And, but the irony of the whole thing and the fact that Mrs. Bly was so down to earth, on occasion you might see a can of green beans on top of the baby grand. Or she might take her hat off, and plop it on top of that. And cats, they love cats. And, but Bobo, the poodle, oh, I love Bobo. And
Full poodle?
Black poodle, he was the smaller poodle.
Okay.
And there was a fire in the attic. I guess I was about 10, and he got everybody up and let them know about the fire. And, they were all sleepy, but he kept pulling the cover off of them and barking, and then they smelled, and it saved the house. Well, are you ready to go up?
Oh, let's go see if we can
Yes.
make an acquaintance.
Many a time I have bang, bang, bang down the stage. You don't have to do it. And you always have the window. Now this room, the first room.
This is tight after you.
Okay. Okay, this room was Mr. Bly's library. This is the library. Okay. And the bookshelves are gone. They were in here, but can you guess why the sink?
To shave in the morning.
Nope.
Clean his pipe.
Nope. He washed his hands before he looked in old documents.
Yes, of course he did.
Oh, of course he would.
And of course there was a closet that this had a safe in it.
And look how they made those closets that they weren't deep.
No, but this was where his safe was, in here. And then this was the master bedroom.
Oh, what a beautiful color.
Oh, well, this was done by the tenants. It was always off-white. This was the master bedroom, and
those shelves were put in later, too.
this was where his shirts were kept. His shirts were done by the laundry, and he was very precise, and his ties came here.
Oh, that's...
And his shirts were sent, from the cleaners, perfectly pressed and folded, and they were put on the shelves. Was another bedroom. Here was basically where hanging clothes were kept. And then storage up above. And then this was the little bedroom.
Wow, it really is an interesting layout here.
This was the little bedroom, and I have slept in this little bedroom many times. And off of this little bedroom, of course, you have another large closet. See here?
Yeah, that's a deep closet.
This was the deep closet. And then this was the upstairs bath.
Now this is over the downstairs.
Right.
So all of
Stacked
the plumbing is
Stacked
in the
plumbing,
same place.
right. I had a bath in this tub.
Not recently.
No, not recently. Okay.
Yeah, that's 50s.
This was sort of a combined playroom, and this is fireproof, and these were where he kept documents also.
Ah.
This was built, especially it's fireproof and it contained legal documents. Okay, the first building you see out there was his photography studio. He did all his processing there. And then the last one down there was where there was a bath, and that was where the
help lived.
Right.
Yeah.
But this was a large house for the time.
Now, Milligan was founded in 1866?
Yes.
Right? And what was here before that? Was it a town?
It was the Hayes Farm, and the community. You don't sense anything? I sense it's nothing dramatic. It's what I've always sensed. I don't sense, it's, the air takes on a different consistency.
That's true.
The bed was where you were standing, of course that was at the end. And this was Linda's bedroom. And
The air is cooler and lighter in here.
That's true.
You know?
altogether different. And that's what I always experience in this room. Nothing like, oh, you know, it's never been a swami feeling. It's just, it's a presence. And I think it goes way back.
Well, time will tell.
Time will tell, and again, there has never been anything but respect. Almost, I guess one might say, a reverence for whatever it is, you know. It's not been discussed openly in the community. Mrs. Bly was always a free spirit, and people would have said, oh, but, you know, because, and their privacy was very important to them.
Where did well, absolutely, because he's dealing with secret documents and
exactly, and yet he loved one of the reasons he was drawn to the house was the property. He loved to take long walks, you know, through the area up there. It was
that
clear.
one that's come down.
Yeah, that came down in that bad storm. But he took long walks, you know.
Just dreamy.
But there was, up until his death, he would have a path mowed, a walking path mowed. And see, this was the nursery.
This was the nursery.
Yes.
This was
The master.
the master bedroom.
You see how it takes on the air when you move from the little room?
I got it. I really felt the difference.
And you know
coming
me to
out.
be reasonably sane.
Oh yeah.
What would Harry think about this?
Look at the difference though.
Her husband is a priest. How's your finger, by the way?
It's fine.
She sliced her finger off.
I didn't slice it off. I just
Trimmed it. Go ahead. But it is interesting that the door was open this morning. Very.
All right, now, when you were here, what was the view here? Did Milligan own this?
Milligan, okay. Milligan did not own, okay, Milligan, you see where the green fence is? And it comes down this way. That was owned by the Taylor house at that time. And down on the lower part, that was owned by the Taylor family. And they sold the house to Milligan. And that property went with it, and then they developed the soccer complex. So initially, they only owned, because you see they had a football team in the 40s. And you can still see some of the remains of the stone steps, but they've redone bleachers. So they only owned from the green fence over, and that in early years was the football field. And of course now, this has become the soccer complex. But now see, this is a beautiful area because, here's...
We didn't need that on the tape.
Remember, he's going to edit it out.
Yes.
See the lamppost,
Yes, I do.
And you came down this way, and
Somebody left his gloves.
yeah. I'll take you in the basement area to show you that. But see, initially this was the drive under garage, which was, part of the town.
It's such a beautiful design.
Yes, come on in.
It's sort of reminiscent of Kirby design, I think. And these are
Yeah.
Again, storage, if you'll notice. Storage all the way across on the top. This was a cedar lined closet one time. He also had the sink down here because he did do some photography things in here on occasion.
Now you're saying he had a dark room in the back?
And the dark room was back here. I'll show you when we go that way.
And was that a hobby of his, or was
Yes,
that?
yes, a hobby. He was a wonderful photographer. This was a shower. But at one time this was part dark room and then converted to a shower. Now be very careful, don't step off there, be careful. And then of course here is the furnace. And at one time, I think you're right, I'm sure at one time that it was coal.
I see the step now.
Yeah, be careful. Found that. And then this was just storage. Water heaters, and things.
That's got to be the coal chute.
I think you're right. I believe that would have been the coal chute. What do you think, Bob?
That's about right.
Because there's the window up there, see? But this was at one time a dark room, and then it was converted to a shower. Yeah, and this was, of course, a cedar closet right here. And there were doors here initially that I remember. We would play down here sometimes,
Where's the
The what?
connection to the upstairs?
Oh, that's right here. You go.
Oh,
That takes you straight up.
oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, I missed that altogether.
Right.
Yeah, but what light there is.
It's going to give you light. And see, the ceiling was also dropped down here, too.
Water drainage.
And this originally was the garage?
Yes. And then he had it, see, it was garage. This part was garage, of course, and that part was like the furnace and what have you.
The cellar where they kept the canned goods.
And then, right, and then Mr. Bly.
In jars.
And then Mr. Bly, of course, converted, to this. And then we'll walk out this way. Beautiful area back here always. And they fed the deer and the birds. They were, as I say, they were animal lovers always. And this area, played out here many a time. We used to play croquet in this area. But this was the carriage house. Yeah, it was locked, I think. Let's see. Yeah. But
Since they put new door on that and padlocked the rest of that, I would say they're
he
keeping
had
something in there.
he had
anyway.
books in here too. There were books in here and documents that were not what you would say secret, but he had a vast collection of a German library. And as I say, I have from the lab, I have the German English chemist dictionary. My dad would need it to translate the Germans, and he was pretty good with German, but he referred to his German dictionary some. And then I have the booklet, and Rob, I'll make those available to you so you
I'd
can
like to
see those.
scan
And
them.
then there was also the tables, the book of the tables, for the equations. And that was of course you had to have that. But I could read the vastness of the area out here. Of course, to a child, to me, this was major. So there was a little cabin up in there at one time, and you could walk up to it. We would walk up there, you know, and you would occasionally see a bear come through.
Sure.
As you saw the deer have always frolicked around here. All kinds of varmints, as we would say.
Now, where you grew up, wasn't there a farm attached to that?
Yes.
So you had a lot of land in your
Yes.
your play world.
Yes, you'll have to come to my. I tell you what, when Elizabeth Ellis comes back, the storyteller that Marjorie knows quite well, Marjorie was one of her students. She's internationally known, Elizabeth, and she grew up in this community. And
Oh, really?
yes, and
she's terrific.
and so we're going to have a little get together when Elizabeth comes. So you and Kate will have to come.
That'd be wonderful.
Yes, and you can meet Elizabeth. I've got to. Let's walk this way. You want to go this way, Margie?
Yeah, I just want to check something out. Right
Sure.
here.
Oh, check
I'll
away.
follow you.
But you know, the way the house is situated, it was respectful of the land, I think.
I think so too.
They built it right into the hillside, you know, and then left this, and yet had privacy, you know.
A real find, especially for a displaced German. You've
Yes.
got the
Yes,
little black forest in your own backyard.
exactly, and that's why he so loved to walk through there. You know, he took long walks. I can remember him with the pipe. You know, I could remember he would come through, you know, and we would follow him, you know, when we were little. But he spoke very fluent English, but he would speak German sometimes. And he would forget and break into German, you know. He'd say 999, you know, things like that, and fascinating. This is the old cistern right here, the old pump. You can see the pressure gauge on it.
Oh yeah.
But most of the comings and goings occurred out the back door, you know.
Oh really?
The car, well, yeah, the car would
Car
be,
came around the back.
but you can see this was screened at one
Yes,
time.
I see.
And it was a maid's quarters, you know.
Does she have a window? Is there a window on the other side of that wall? The maid's quarters. Is it just a...
Oh, here,
Yes, I
no,
think there is.
the window's here. Yeah, oh, there is, I forgot. Right, here's the window in the maid's quarter, and then that's the living room, dining room windows there. You didn't just pull up to the bride's property unless you were invited, shall we say. Now, I pulled up to it, our family pulled up to it anytime
But you were,
in the inner circle.
yeah.
And that was a privilege and an honor. And I know I can remember people would say in later years, it must have been nice to have been included in the Bly's inner circle. And what was it like? And it was just like any other home. But it was a mystique. It was, you know, or why were the Bly's so private? You know, they didn't understand. And it was the German, too. Again, I have always respected this house, you know, for more reasons than one.
Memories. It's going to come down the next couple of days, huh?
Well, it depends on how they schedule it. I'll let you know when if you want to film it.
Take a picture from here on my...
And I will
cell
make
phone.
those copies available that I have to you.
Let me show you something.